Hi everyone, happy 4th of July. This is Felicia with Super Nerdy Church Girl, and I am here to review Power, Season 4, Episode 2, Things Are Going to Get Worse. So, this episode, we see a lot of the consequences of James St. Patrick's actions. He's actually having to feel the consequences of his relationship with Angela, his poor judgment, and some of the things he's done as a drug dealer slash killer slash mogul. So the scene opens with James. He's peeing blood in the prison toilet or whatever, because if you recall from the last episode, he was being beaten by the guards while handcuffed. So he gets a meeting with his lawyer, Proctor. He walks in and Proctor sees that he's limping, and Proctor's just like, well, did you fight back? And he's like, no. He's like, well, great. So Proctor basically tells him, okay, sit tight, I'm working on a strategy, but you're going to be here for a while, so I need you to get on the prison phone system and call some people. So James, he first calls Dre, who's at the club, and Dre reassures him that he has everything on lock. He's working with Karen Bassett to get the deals done. Little does James know that on the flip side, Dre is now running drugs through Truth. And ironically, he's, running drugs through Truth to try to protect Tariq, who is James' son, because Tariq is the dumbest rich kid ever. So we also see that during this scene, Proctor James is trying to assist Proctor in a strategy. So he says, you have to tell them about me and Angela's relationship. And Proctor is just like, no, that is a terrible idea. So cut to the meeting with the district attorneys, with their new lead, Tom, and not Sandoval, but the other guy. I can't think of his name. Someone drop it in the comments for me. He says, why don't we introduce the relationship Angela had with Knox and St. Patrick? And Tom is basically telling them that this is a bad idea. And while they're having this discussion, Angela kind of overhears them in the hallway, and she's like highly offended. And so then she comes in the room and interrupts their little strategy session. She gets a one-on-one with Tom, and Tom is basically like, look, if I put you on the stand, so she says the same thing as James, put me on the stand. And that will introduce the whole jealous ex theory and pretty much nail James, his coffin shut. So Tom is basically like, okay, well, he does this mock interrogation. At the same time, Proctor is doing this mock interrogation of James St. Patrick. And there's this back and forth with the camera. So Tom would ask a question, and then James would answer, or Angela would start to answer, and James would finish the answer. Because they're basically stuck in the same situation. If they introduce their relationship, in terms of Angela, it's going to show that she was compromised. Not only was she compromised, but the entire office, because they knew and they didn't say anything or do anything about it. In terms of James, how he compromises him, he and Proctor are going back and forth, and Proctor says, well, you killed him in a jealous rage, and James says, I would never kill someone in law enforcement. And Proctor's like, well, why the distinction? Have you ever killed anyone? And so then James can't answer the question. Proctor tells him if he ever perjures himself, he could never testify in his own defense ever, and that's really gonna ruin their attorney-client relationship and his ability to help him. So, that pretty much ends that scene. Neither one of them are going to testify. Tom is still on this theory that Tommy is Ghost, and Knox was Crooked, and he was working with Tommy, along with the Felipe Lobos deal. And somehow, then James killed Knox at the request or order of Thomas Eakin. So their theory is totally wrong, and they're just going down this rabbit hole. And, that's pretty much setting up some of the action for the subsequent scenes this season. So, later on, we see, Tasha with the kids, and she's basically, she's dealing with the fallout. She's basically trying to coach the kids to on what to say, how to never call their dad Ghost. She tells him that he wants them to come visit, and Tariq still being a little bit of a jerk about it, and Tasha basically is like, this isn't up for discussion. You're gonna visit your dad. He loves you and he misses you. So she drops the kids off at school. Paparazzi are there, and Tasha jumps out the car and she breaks the paparazzi's camera, and Tariq's like, what, am I supposed to act like you? Then he walks off in a huff into school, and his little sister Raina is basically like, Tariq, I don't know who you are anymore. And Tariq's all fed up, so he calls Kanan on the phone, and Kanan was just like, yo, just go visit your dad and play the game, and I have some work for you later, or whatever. So this next discussion, let's talk about Kisha and Tommy, because I need to get that out. So Kisha goes to visit Tommy, and she's basically like, I want your name off of my business, you're in Tasha's. And he's like, it's too late for that. If we start messing with the finances, that's gonna tip off the feds. And he's basically like, I got you, trust me. And then there's this little, je ne sais quoi that develops between them. They give each other this look or whatever, and I'm just like, okay, they are so gonna hook up. But but that ends that scene. Well, before I end that, Kisha tells Tommy, she's like, look, you don't get it, I have a son, and if you had a child, you understand. And we all know from last season, Tommy killed a pregnant Holly, although he didn't know she was pregnant at the time. And so that, Kisha bringing that up, sends Tommy into this whole blank stare thing, and he's like, I got you. So later on in the episode, he shows up at her house, and, Keisha's just wearing this body dress, and I'm just like, who walks around their house all alone like that? But anyway, the girl looks great, and so they end up having a tryst, which is kind of crazy. She later tells Tommy that Tasha can't know anything about it because everything good she has, she takes, like her business and like Sean. And so this is the first time Tommy is hearing that Tasha actually had a relationship with Sean, who is Kanan's son, who Kanan killed. So this whole tangled web is just getting even more and more tangled. So Cristobal, who is one of Tommy's drug dealer distributors or whatever, he's trying to find a new connect because he doesn't believe that their drug business is safe now that James is in jail and he didn't get out on bail like Tommy told him. So there's this whole little scene with that where Julio he tells Tommy he'll take care of the situation. Word gets back to Tommy, to Julio. He tells Tommy, and Tommy's like, okay, I'm gonna handle it. And Julio says, no, I'll handle it. So he takes a couple guys. He goes to visit Cristobal and his guy. And there's this scuffle. One of Cristobal's guys punches one of Tommy's guys, and instead of Julio handling it in the way Tommy would, he basically smooths things out. So the guy who gets punched, he tells Tommy this, and Tommy's on this vendetta, and he actually hunts the guy who hit his boy down, and he runs him over with the car. But that's Tommy for you. A little jail scene. I'm sorry, I'm reading my notes. So James, this guy named Biscuit, approaches him while he's, eating or whatever, and he's basically letting him know that he finds him attractive, but in a threatening way. And so under the table, James pretty much almost breaks this guy's wrist. And the guy, Tony, who we saw introduced last episode, he tells Biscuit to, get out of Dodge or whatever. And so we know that something's going to happen with this whole Tommy and Tony and Ghost being in jail, but we don't know quite what it is. We do see Tony's wife introduced, and she has cancer, and there's pressure on him to turn snitch in order to get his wife this experimental cancer treatment. They need the money up front, and he doesn't have the money. So it's building up to, you know, if he is he gonna turn snitch and somehow implicate Tommy / Ghost in any of this. So Tom, it's a lot of T's today. Tom tells Angela and her gang of misfits that they are seeking the death penalty for James. And so Angela has this moment where she's like, well, I didn't know you were seeking it. He's like, yeah, I always do, blah, blah, blah. And in the meantime, all of this, you know, they raid the feds raid Truth, and Sandoval is with them, and he plants a gun in Jamie's office. But before he plants the gun, he tells Dre he needs the security footage, so Dre has to shut the security cameras down, which gives him the opportunity to plant the gun. And so the Donovan, they call him Black Donovan as a joke, he ends up finding the gun, and now not only do they have his fingerprints, they have the gun, and they have the DNA under Greg's nails. And so Tom is going to shoot for the death penalty. Proctor tells James they're suing for the death penalty. They call and tell Tasha, and she's having, you know, this kind of breakdown moment, and she's trying to keep it from the kids. James calls Tommy, and he lets them know that they're going to give him a needle, and Tommy's like, no, you can't go out like that. And then he tells Tommy to take care of his family, but he uses the phrase help me, and I think that that's going to be used somehow in the future, because if you recall, Holly, when Tommy killed Holly accidentally, he was, you know, a mess, and James used his spare key to come into Tommy's house, and he sees him on the floor with Holly's body, and all Tommy can do is he says help me. And so now it's the flip situation, and James is saying, help me. And Tommy's like, well, what do you want me to do? And he's like, take care of my family. But I think that the writers are kind of dropping that little nugget, and I'm pretty sure it's going to, you know, we're going to see something pop up in subsequent episodes. So Tasha goes to visit Angela, which I think is so dumb. And, you know, basically she's like, you know, he wouldn't leave a gun. You know, this is a setup. And Angela basically is like, I don't know why you're always so shocked, but they have his fingerprints, they have the gun, they have the DNA. And then she says, when I walked into Truth that day, I had a boyfriend. His name was Greg Knox. So Tasha is completely blindsided again, because she didn't know that Greg Knox was Angela's boyfriend, which is leading up to James having a motive. So Angela tells her, for what it's worth, I wish I'd never walked into Truth. And Tasha says, well, that's something we both can agree on. So then we see Kanan hem up Dre in one of the hallways of Truth, and he's upset because Tariq asked him about a Kanan. And Tariq knows about Kanan because Tasha asked, had he ever heard that name? So Kanan thinks Dre told, and he basically was like, you know, you were paying me to stay away from Tariq, now you're paying me to keep yourself alive. And so we know that that's going to lead to some drama in the future. So that's pretty much the episode in a nutshell. And I say that nothing really happened, but I see a lot of setup for the subsequent episodes, and I'm really excited about it. So if you have some insight that maybe I missed, please drop it in the comments, subscribe, and like the video. Thank you guys.